On the upfront segment tonight, the Senate race in Michigan. We're pleased to bring both candidates to you for extended interviews on back-to-back nights. Tonight, it's the Republican challenger, John James, the former Apache helicopter pilot and Iraq War veteran who now runs the family business James Group International. Mr. James, thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dave.
We're a couple of weeks out to Election Day now. People of Michigan are voting already, voting in big numbers, according to the Secretary of State. Polling indicates this race against Gary Peters for you could be a very tight one. First of all, how are you feeling about your chances just 2 weeks out now?
We're feeling very, very good, mostly because the people in the state of Michigan are ready for change. And having someone who was raised in Detroit, someone who had the opportunity to go to West Point, someone who had the opportunity to serve and fight for his country as a Ranger qualified Apache pilot who understands what it takes to bring people together to accomplish very tough missions, regardless of what your race, color, and creed is, and then have the ability and the blessing to come back home to help provide jobs and to help out in the community from a philanthropic standpoint, to have the ability to serve with firsthand experience in the real world, it really makes a difference. And also, I've heard people are excited to have representation and have essentially a stab and out James, Democrat, Republican, and regardless of who's in the majority or who's in the White House, Michigan not being shut out so we can finally get results, stability, and unity that we also desperately need and want.
All right, let's get to some specifics here because there are clear differences with your opponent. And I think the place to start is health care, an issue that's so important to so many people. The ACA or Obamacare is in place. President Trump and Republicans have tried to dismantle it, but as yet there's no replacement plan. You have said you want to protect existing conditions that are part of the ACA, but what else does a Republican or John James health care plan look like? Because to this point, many have not been satisfied with your answer, including, I guess, your opponent.
Well, I don't think that my opponent would ever be satisfied with my answer. And I think that's part of what's wrong with politics. People try to stick knives in each other and forget the whole reason that they're running to begin with. I'm running to help others win. And part of what I want to be able to do is to have a market-based, patient-centered approach that must cover pre-existing conditions, a legislative requirement that allows increasing in competition, increase in transparency, which would lower prescription drug costs, which would lower the cost of care, increase quality, and allow patients to make the best decision for themselves. I think that with regulatory, tort, and tax reform, you would have the more power with the patients and the doctors and not the federal government and insurance companies. And I've said this for ages, and I understand as a job provider, as a small business owner, that we need to do much, much more because we need to fix the parts of Obamacare that are broken and keep the parts that are not. And Gary Peters just yesterday on WXYZ admitted this after millions have been spent against me for simply wanting to improve ACA. Now he comes out 2 weeks before an election talking about ACA being broken and not working for small business owners and those whom we employ, when 71% of Michiganders are on employer-based health care. Well, it's too late for Senator Peters to gaslight and change his tune. Again, things from reinsurance, associations to increase choice for Michiganders and Americans, allowing competition across state lines to increase risk pools. These are all things that will be a part of my plan. And this is where I've always said that both parties have failed the American people. Both parties have failed, particularly on healthcare, where you have one party that's saying we need to pass it to see what's in it, and left many people behind. As Senator Peters says that the tax credits that he thought were in ACA aren't working for small businesses, and he admitted it. And Republicans just want to pull the rug out from under people without having a plan in place to take care of folks. I protect people in my company because healthcare is very important to me. I have a son with pre-existing conditions, and I have hundreds of employees who rely on me to provide healthcare for them. So I'm on the same healthcare plan that my employees are on. Meanwhile, Senator Peters, to this night, refuses to answer questions about what plan he's on. He is on a government funded plan that we don't get to have, but we do get to pay for it. And I don't think that's fair.
Republicans have the White House, so they control the Senate. And during this time, nothing positive has really moved forward, though. Is that disappointing?
I believe that right now the focus is not on blaming someone who's not a politician for the failures of what's going on in Washington, but send someone who understands what it's like in the real world, who has real world experience accomplishing mission to go ahead and try and fix these things. When Senator Peters has already proven that he will vote against things simply because of party lines. I don't think that's acceptable, and I believe people in the state of Michigan have the opportunity to send someone who will put people before politics when Gary Peters has proven that he'll do exactly the opposite.
All right, let's move on. In 2018, you were quoted as saying you were a 2,000% supporter of President Trump. Not surprisingly, that's being used against you by your opponent in this campaign. President Trump's approval ratings are not great. Polls show the president is trailing Joe Biden nationally and here in Michigan. We're in the middle of a pandemic as well, of course. Is your support of the president helping or hurting you now as the race nears the finish line?
Well, you even have the New York Times saying that Senator Peters and I are about tied, and that's after Democrats have spent $40 million in this race and more. I think the people of the state of Michigan have a very high sensitivity toward lies and BS, and I think they will see a 39-year-old black guy from Detroit. They can look at me and see that too many people have died for me to have the right to think and vote for myself. I was raised by two Democrats in the Jim Crow South, and Senator Peters has to stake his entire career on trying to make me look like Donald Trump. Look, I believe that people in the state of Michigan can make their own decisions, and I can think independently. And I've always said that I can agree with the president without worshiping him, and I can disagree without attacking him. When he's doing things that work for Michigan, I'll help him. When he's doing things that don't work for Michigan, I'll fight him. But see, here's the other truth that you won't hear. President Trump is term limited. He's temporary. But the issues that you see around our state and around our city have been around for decades. Senator Peters has been in Washington for 12 years, been in the Senate for 6, and been in politics for 30. And we're still passing that past the same broken buildings. Our schools are still failing, and our kids are still drinking poison water. There's still dumping in Lake St. Clair. There's algae blooms in the Erie, and there's Asian carp DNA in the Chicago River. So at some point, we're going to have to take a look at the elected officials that we're sending to Washington and demand better. I think that Senator Peters is lying to preserve his job, and that's what you can expect of career politicians. And frankly, if people are being honest, 33% of the state had no clue who Gary Peters was until an election year. That's wrong. And most people still can't put their finger on what Gary Peters has done. I think someone who can bring better representation and better experience is what we need more of. And Senator Peters is never going to change. So we have to change it for him.
All right, you've criticized Peters for how he responded to the spread of COVID-19 back in February as this was really beginning to unfold. President Trump has also been critical of COVID-19, but how about his response and the administration's response? You haven't criticized President Trump for the coronavirus response.
Well, certainly not an open forum, but I will say the president did, I believe, what he thought was what he believed was best. He shut down the border with China and put a former governor, a former legislator, and current vice president together to marshal the resources of the federal government quickly to solve this COVID problem that we're still working our way through. But I'm not running against President Trump. I'm not running against Joe Biden. I'm running against Gary Peters. We need to stay focused on this race in the United States Senate for the state of Michigan. And the fact is that Senator Peters is ranking on the Homeland Security Committee. And in his capacity, his very first meeting in 2015, he received a report on 33 ways that we can be more prepared for pandemics. And at the end of last year, only 2 have been satisfied. That's his responsibility. When he failed to show up for 89% of the committee hearings to hold China accountable, when he failed to show up for 84% of the meetings for small business hearings and missed all of them in 2012, when small businesses are struggling to provide health care for their people and are struggling to get access to credit and capital. Senator Peters failed to show up to 80% of the meetings for pandemic preparedness, and then recently he voted against COVID relief. So people want to point the finger at the president. You have somebody to hold accountable in Gary Peters. Not showing up for work, being invisible, continuing to get rich off the back of the American taxpayers while he's on an ACA exempted plan is not fair, is not right. And Senator Peters is trying to scapegoat the president to hide from the fact that he's invisible and he doesn't show up for work.
All right, this goes too quickly. We're almost out of time, but last question. President Trump won Michigan by less than 11,000 votes last election. Can you win Michigan this seat without President Trump winning this state?
So the focus has always been on running my best race. I outperformed the top of the ticket last time, and I'm going to do it this time. I believe the people of the state of Michigan are ready for change, and having somebody who has combat experience, who understands how to protect American lives because they've done it before, and someone who has business experience keeping their people on health care plan, the same health care that their families on, protecting people's livelihoods, are what we're going to need to move this nation forward to emerge from the health and economic crisis caused by COVID. I'm your guy.
John James, thank you for the time. Thank you for your service. And we wish you the best of luck these last couple of weeks.
Yes, sir. God bless. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. John James, the Senate Republican candidate in Michigan. Tomorrow, the incumbent Senator Gary Peters will be our guest on UpFront. We'll look at his record, his priorities if reelected, and why he believes Michigan voters should send him back to Washington for a second 6-year term. That's tomorrow night on Action News at 7. We're back in a moment.